Welcome to Mild Moodcast, a podcast meant to explore mental health through the lens of another human hanging on by a thread. I'm Bianca, a licensed mental health counselor, here to chat about the topics we don't get enough of. So grab your headphones and let's dive into the crazy world of mental health. It's going to be a wild ride. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mild Moodcast. Happy Sunday, or whatever day you're listening to this. I hope you guys have had an amazing week and that you are prepared for the one ahead. I feel like the only reason I'm prepared for this week ahead is because I'm going on a trip in my favorite rocket ship, zooming through the sky, little Einsteins. Yeah, I just had to do that because that's how my brain works. But I'm going on a trip from Wednesday until Monday of next week, and I'm just so excited. So yeah, got some stuffs to get done, gotta pack. I've been working on it. I finally set the passcodes to my new suitcase because I realized I never did that. So set the whatever, I don't even think it's called a passcode, whatever the hell that thing is called, to the suitcase, and gotta get all the things on my list together. But I am stoked. Hope you guys are having a good week, like I said, or going to have a good week. If it hasn't been great, I understand. We are, I think, in the last 24 hours of the technical retrograde, but of course there's still a shadow period after, and retrograde has been retrograding for a lot of fucking people. So if you can relate, I'm sorry. As you can see, today's episode is called Friendships Fading and Who Gets to Stay, a part of this like miniature, I don't even really want to call it a mini series because I don't know that it's that, but just continuation, I guess. What really sort of brought this on was just kind of me thinking about friendships recently, thinking about the way they changed, thinking about different things that I've been through, you know, kind of like the people that you thought would maybe stick with you forever, or people that you never thought would stick with you actually hanging around. But yeah, I'm going to do my disclaimer and then I will jump into the myth of forever friends. As always, while my podcast is meant to spark reflection and curiosity, it is not a replacement for therapy. If you're navigating heavy emotions or challenges, please reach out to a professional. Therapy is a safe space to process and grow. I do just want to say too, sometimes when I am recording, things like my AC will turn on and all of a sudden it gets really loud in the microphone no matter what I do. And I just don't want to die in heat. But also, on top of that, the little cracks that you hear in the background are literally my office chair, which is so annoying because it's a new chair. But this one is just one squeaky mofo. So sometimes I edit it out. Sometimes it happens in the middle of me talking like it did a second ago. And well, everything can't be perfect. Okay. So if you hear things in the background, no, you don't. All right. So the myth of forever friends. Let's be honest. As I said a minute ago, friendships don't always last. And you know, we were never taught how to grieve them when they don't. We sort of like romanticize the idea of forever friendships, assuming that the people who were there for our teenage chaos or like our college years will be right by our side for every adult milestone. But what happens when they're not? What happens when it's you who feels like the connection has shifted? You know, friendship breakups are not usually loud. They're usually quiet. It's like texts start having really long pauses. You're missing calls that you're not returning. There are inside jokes that might have started out as warm and now they just kind of feel forced. You know, and it's confusing because usually like there's no huge betrayal. It's just like slowly over time, it starts to erode. And what no one really prepares you for is that healing sometimes requires letting go of people we thought we'd always have. It's not heartless to notice that a friendship isn't serving either of you anymore. Sometimes love continues, but in a new form. One that doesn't include proximity or frequent updates. And I just want to touch on that for a second because it's like the media, society will be like, oh, my day ones, all of my people who were there. And then there's this idea that like when you grow, you're not allowed to have different friends. You're not allowed to want new friendships. You're not allowed to see or be aware that the people that you surround yourself with might not have been the best. Because maybe for a long time, like, I always say that you weren't awake to it, but quite literally, like, you just didn't know. You thought these people are great. These people are my people, and I want to hang out with them. And then as we mature, as we go through different life stages, that changes. And you have the people who are really loud when they get hurt about something like that. Like, oh, you just thought that you could drop us. You thought that you could move on, and it creates this tension where you're like, okay, but that's the old version of me versus who I see myself going forward. Or maybe you notice it, but you put it on a shelf for the idea of loyalty. Like, yeah, I should be loyal to this group of people just because they've been in my life for years, despite the fact that I'm now uncomfortable. But it's quote unquote easier to ignore because you feel like it's the right thing to do. You know, adulthood changes everything, not just our routines, but the way that we connect with others. Our priorities shift. Our energy becomes super limited. And for many of us, you know, especially if you're navigating like healing or trauma recovery, you don't have the capacity to show up in the way you once did. Adult friendships are less about seeing each other every day and more about, can I trust you? Do I feel safe around you? Can we pick up where we left off even if months have passed? Some friends will get that, and some flat out won't. And that's the fork in the road. When someone doesn't understand your new boundaries, your healing process, the fact that your needs have shifted, you're then faced with that painful decision of whether to explain or walk away. And sometimes it's both. I start friendships on the idea that I disappear for 3 to 5 business days because that's how I recharge. And I saw, you know, recently this post on Twitter where a girl was like, if someone tells you that they need all this downtime and they can't talk to you every day, they don't care about you and they don't prioritize you, and I call bullshit. I call complete bullshit. And I'm really not the type of person to comment on other people's posts. Like, I'll do it every now and again, but mostly, and I've said this before, like if I see it in the morning, I might comment on it because you get like morning conversation energy out of me. But at the end of the day, I ain't doing it. Or I'll do it and then it ends up being a hit tweet and suddenly I have all these comments and I'm like, all right, cool, argue with yourselves. I'm out. But it really bothered me because one of the things that I tell anyone who is honestly willing to listen, because it's more than just my clients, when you're creating friendships with people, it's okay to start off by saying, this is what I have to bring to the table as a friendship. This is what I'm capable of maintaining. If you can't maintain talking to someone every single day, you don't need to promise that you're going to do that. And just because you can't doesn't mean you don't care. Now, I'm not talking romantic relationships. That is not the same thing. Let me be excruciatingly clear that you need to be available for your partner every day. I don't care. Taking time to yourself is fine during the day, but disappearing for a full day, no. But in terms of friendships, even in terms of family, it's okay to take time for yourself. My best friend and I, traditionally, we talk every single day, but sometimes we have gone a day or two without saying anything, and then we come back and we kind of apologize because we're like, oops, sorry, my bad. I didn't mean to not say anything. But even though we talk every day, we might only talk at like 4 p.m. It's not like we're talking all day every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, you recognize that there are going to be times where you have that everyday energy, and there are going to be times where you just fucking don't, because the rest of life is still happening around you and happening to you all at the same time. So just wanted to say that. But let's talk about the guilt of outgrowing someone, right? Because I was obviously talking about starting new friendships with your truth, the truth. But let's talk about that word, guilt. It shows up a lot when you feel yourself pulling away from someone who hasn't technically done anything wrong. But guilt isn't always an indicator of wrongdoing. Sometimes guilt just means I care about you, but I can't shrink myself to keep you comfortable anymore. It's totally okay to grow in a different direction. It's okay to not want to relive the same stories over and over again with someone who only sees an outdated version of you. And it's okay to want friendships that challenge you, that nourish you, that reflect this current version of who you're becoming. That doesn't mean you don't love the person. It just means you love yourself enough to make space for friendships that are reciprocal, friendships that are supportive and emotionally aligned. So here's the big question: who gets to stay? And obviously, this is your decision, but it should be the people who don't guilt trip you for changing, the ones who make space for your growth without making it about them, the ones who don't expect you to stay in emotional debt because of the past, the ones who are curious about who you are now, not just who you were when they met you. And sometimes that answer surprises you. People you never expected to stick around do, and then people that you thought were permanent, they show you they were only passing through. Let them. Let people exit when that chapter ends, and let new people enter without comparing them to characters from old stories. Let yourself believe that friendships can evolve, even if that evolution looks like distance. And maybe that thought's uncomfortable, and that's okay. You might find yourself in old groups where you realize, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't like the way this feels. I don't like your reaction to something. Maybe it's political. People who you loved, people you enjoyed, because people really, really show themselves politically. And that doesn't mean that you have to keep them around. People believe that you should, but I'm just a unfriend, unfamily, whatever to keep my peace kind of person, and not in an avoidant way. In a, if this is going to cause me harm, I don't want it way. I have to be able to put myself first, and so do you. I mentioned last week that I would love if people would ask me a few questions, and I got some, so I chose 3. And I don't mind choosing more than 3. These were just some of them were kind of similar, so I was good with it. Question 1, and I kind of touched on this already. How do I make new friends in my 30s without feeling like I'm behind everyone else who already has their people? And when I say I kind of touched on it, obviously I didn't talk about being behind, but I did talk about coming in with what you are able to maintain. A huge part of the work that I do with my clients is learning how to not judge yourself. Feeling like regardless there is space for you. Because when I see the question, feeling like I'm behind everyone else who has their people, what about that makes you behind? Are we not all on our own timing? So what would I recommend? Because again, can't tell you what to do, but can answer the question. Determine what's doable for you. Understand that you're not there to show up as anything but a friend. And try not to compare yourself to anyone else. That's the entire point of understanding what you can commit to as a friend. Not to worry about who else they see, not to worry about whether or not you measure up, but to bring what you have to the table. Because if you think about it, if you wanted friends, even if you had others, would you be worried about comparing them? And if that answer is yes, then, that's a completely different conversation. I'd be interested to know why. What's the comparison there? So if they're not going to compare you, why compare yourself? A lot of times when we worry about things like that, we count ourselves out before we give ourselves permission. Before someone else comes in and says, hey, I like you around. But if you counted yourself out, you'll never hear that. So, how do you make new friends? Bumble BFF? No, that is one way, but just really showing up with who you are, not who other people expect you to be. You can't maintain someone's expectation. You can maintain who you're becoming. Question 2. I feel like I've changed so much in my 30s. How do I explain that to friends who still see me as who I used to be? One of the number one things that you hear me tell my clients, or that they hear me say, is as you grow, as you learn new verbiage, as you go to therapy, as you work on trauma, as you change, other people around you may not be doing the same thing. And that is a cold, hard truth. Why is it a cold, hard truth? Because all of what you're doing is for you. It's not for other people to specifically understand. So you'll have the people, as I mentioned earlier, who are progressive, who might surprise you, who want to stick around for that new version of you. But what happens to the people who don't? It's like they've had a mirror turned on them. So now they look at you as, oh, so just because you have this, what the hell does that mean for me? Which actually kind of leads into question 3, but I'm gonna pause on that thought. How do you explain it to friends who still see you as you used to be? Maybe because there is a lack of trust. Learning how to be forthcoming with the fact that you're growing. Hey, I know we don't really talk about this, but these are things that I'm actively working on, and I would appreciate if you gave me the space to show you who I am now. Because there might be some people who still see you as that old person. Maybe in this question, it's like they're really immature and they still see you as that immature version. And this is kind of what I was saying with, you have to decide who you want to stay and who you want to go. You can express, yo, I'm not into that anymore. Those aren't things I'm willing to do. Those aren't things I'm willing to say. And they might be like, come on, what do you mean you've done this, for 29 straight years? 25 years I've known you. 5 years I've known you, and you've always been the same. Well, I'm not the same person that I was 6 months ago. And this is how I'm living, going forward. So how do you explain it to people? By being open and recognizing that you're explaining it for yourself. You're not explaining it for them. Because they may or may not understand. So if you explain it for them, you run the risk of disappointment when you don't get the response that you wanted. When you explain it for you, their response has little sway. And I say little because obviously, we're humans. I'm not going to say no sway. Little sway over the way that you feel. And that's purely because there'll be that emotional attachment of, damn, I didn't want this person to be out of my life, but they're not seeing me. But it's not going to make you change. It's not going to make you go back on the growth that you've had because you explained it for you. Question 3. What if my friends are the ones who don't have the emotional language? How do I handle that without sounding superior? Great fucking question. Because as I said before, a lot of times people just don't. They don't. And it takes a long time for some to be able to see you in the light of, oh, you are changed and you are different. Sometimes you have to leave those friendships. Recognizing that calling yourself superior, or them projecting and calling you superior, is just that, projection. It's a judgment that is placed, whether it be placed by you or placed by them. Getting really comfortable with your why. Why did I change? Why did I do this? Helps you understand that it's not coming from a place of superiority. So it doesn't matter if they think it sounds like it's coming from a place of superiority. Your heart knows the truth. And you can try to explain that. You know, like, no, man, I'm just doing better for myself and I want to make sure I hold me accountable. Some people are going to get it immediately. Some people are going to be like, fuck you, dude. What happened to you? And that's why I said with question number 2, doing it for yourself and understanding that they may feel like you're going to be superior. And if that's not your stance and they're not willing to hear you and they're not willing to understand because something that you've done has made them feel uncomfortable because they now have a mirror, on themselves. And they're like, oh my God, that's not a part of who I am. I don't like looking at this. You have to determine whether or not you want to keep them. Is it workable with some people? Sure, they might be uncomfortable at first. And as you reinforce, this is my boundary, this is who I am, this is my emotional language, because people are uncomfortable. I watched a video on TikTok the other day. It was so cute. So fucking cute. I was like, they are healing this boy. They were putting together a bouquet of flowers. Now, I don't know who the recipient of the bouquet of flowers was. I'm going to assume that it was a girl because there were 3 men total, 2 on the camera, 1 off, but you could hear them talking, and young men. One of them was putting the flowers together. The other one, he's kind of like laughing, and he's like, man, I don't like giving flowers to people. And his friends both immediately go, why? And he says, I don't know, I just don't. And then one dude behind the camera goes, yeah, but you got to ask yourself why. I always try to ask myself why if I notice that there's an issue arising when I'm doing something. And they got him to verbalize, it's because I'm uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. And they said, that's a good answer. Why are you uncomfortable? Because they're both asking at this point, right? The one dude, he's still building the flowers, but he's very much in the conversation. And the guy's like kind of smiling and doing the thing that we all do, like when we sort of mask discomfort with laughter. And he's like, I don't know, I get uncomfortable. Like I'm gonna go hand someone this really pretty thing. And they go, yeah, but think about it. Why does this make you uncomfortable? Where is that coming from? And he's like, well, I guess it's because we didn't do that. And his friend goes, there it is. And I was like, damn, these are some good fucking friends. Like, they're healing this boy. And so they proceed to talk about this subject. They proceed to say, there it is. When we grew up, this was love that we experienced in our household. This was affection that we got from our mom. And the one dude's like, yeah, I didn't. And they're like, right, you didn't receive affection that looked like this. And that is where your discomfort comes from. So how can we change that? And that change talk, oh my God. I was like, first of all, just human to human, it touched my heart because you don't see a lot of videos where men are encouraging other men. You hope for it, you wish for it. But a lot of times, what do men do? Notice I didn't say always, but there are quite a few that will make fun of you. The dude who told them that he was uncomfortable, if they would have mirrored that back to him in terms of, oh yeah, it is stupid, right? Ha 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 ha. He could have passed it off. He could have been like, yep, I'm cool with being uncomfortable. But because his friends challenged him to understand where that discomfort came from, it changed everything for him in that moment. Even if it doesn't immediately turn into, because it won't immediately turn into, cool, I'm comfortable buying a woman flowers. No, but he's going to think about it more, and he's going to be a lot more likely to do it. And so maybe he finally does it and he gets a good response from it, and then it becomes a normal thing. And that's what happens when we are susceptible to the things that other people say. It can go one of 2 ways. It can help us grow, or it can help us stay where we were. And I just thought that was so special, allowing for moments like that in your life. It's really what it's all about. I don't even remember why I specifically chose to talk about that because, ADHD brain. But I think that was a good example, honestly, of a way that his friends didn't sound superior. They cared. Oh, that's what it was. It was, on the subject of reinforcing who you are, reinforcing your boundaries, and just having that change talk when you're met with someone else who doesn't. Because that boy didn't. He didn't have the emotional language. But he had a little something after that conversation. And I mean, literally, homeboy was really driving home. Ask yourself why. Be curious, because it's not about judgment. And I've said this 11 times at this point. Be curious as to where this stuff comes from when discomfort arises. Why am I so uncomfortable in conversation? Why do I feel like I want to run? Why do I feel like I want to shut down? Why do I say that everything is fine when my heart knows it's not? Not because you want to judge you, but because you want to understand where it comes from and then learn how to open yourself up to something else. I wanted to take a second to say thank you for the questions that came in this week, and I hope that you guys send some more. If you like that, let me know. If you think I should put them somewhere else in the episode, I'm open to suggestion. But I hope everybody has an amazing week. And thank you once again for listening to my podcast. Next week's episode is called Therapy Isn't a Luxury. It's life-saving. It's an interesting topic. I hope you guys get to check it out. Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Mild Moodcast. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. If you have any burning questions or topics you'd like me to cover, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on YouTube at Mild Moodcast and Instagram at Mild Mood Therapy. Let's keep the conversation going and continue to explore the wonderful world of mental health together. Until next time, stay curious and keep smiling.